Sweet pies, hand pies, even fried pies. The world of pie is endless and delicious. From French silk to the more creative pies, including apple pear or butterscotch pecan, it's a classic American dessert that withstands the test of time. But if you travel back to medieval England during the dish's early days, it was actually served as a savory pastry. Ever heard of pigeon pie? Doesn't sound the most appetizing compared to the flavors of today.
I do make an all-cranberry pie, but more typically I'll just include a handful, maybe a cup and a half of fresh cranberries in an apple or an apple pear pie. That, especially this time of year, getting into the festive holiday season, it's kind of nice to have that splash of red inside your filling.
That's Ken Haedrich, and he lives for pie. He's built a reputation for perfecting different variations of the delicacy and says everyone at any skill level can create one at home. Haedrich is a longtime food writer and cookbook author of the new release Pie Academy. Looking back, his love for the dish began when he was a child, and his parents would spend long afternoons baking in the kitchen.
I was one of 7 kids, and my mom and dad would put us in the Woody station wagon, and we'd go up into the foothills around Plainfield, New Jersey, where I grew up, and they would pick up big bushel baskets full of apples, and then we'd all come home, and the kids would sit around the table and watch Mom and Dad make their apple pie. And Dad was the crust guy. He'd get out his can of Crisco and start whipping up a crust. And Mom was the fruit gal, and she would cut all the apples. We'd wait around anxiously for the pie to come out. And it smelled so wonderful. So that is sort of, when you grow up with your folks doing something like that, how could you not love pies,
From apple pie to triple-layer pumpkin chocolate, pie is ubiquitous around the world. Sweet pies are a mainstay here in the States, but other countries, like Great Britain, still specialize in savory pies. From pork pie to cottage pie, which is made of a beef mincemeat topped with mashed potatoes. In Australia and New Zealand, hand-sized meat and gravy pies are a popular on-the-go snack that's often served at sports arenas and local eateries. In the U.S., you can find pie in the bakery section of nearly every grocery store. But if you're looking for a singular slice, there's nothing quite like sitting at a counter of a local diner and enjoying a piece with a cup of milk or coffee. Haedrich highlights that many diners in the U.S. are particularly good at doling out hefty slices of homemade cream pie.
Thick pastry cream filling and then the whipped cream mounted high on top, or sometimes a meringue, and they're just beautiful. I think there's just something about them being these big American originals. People just love these pies, and you see them, someone will order one, the waiter or waitress will bring this big slab of cream pie to the table, and it's just like you look to the table next to you and you look over and say, I want a piece of that,
Haedrich himself went a bit unconventional this Thanksgiving, straying away from the typical pecan and pumpkin and instead opting for a creamier buttermilk pie. Never heard of it? The filling is made with pantry staples like butter, sugar, egg yolks, and buttermilk, all beaten together and folded in with whisked egg whites to create a rich southern custard pie. Top it with a dollop of whipped cream, and you're all set. Haedrich says pie fillings are often easier than most people assume, but that for home bakers, the most nail-biting part of the process is usually the crust.
People don't often know first of all, how long to cut the fat into the flour, into the dry ingredients. They're a little bit uncertain about how much liquid to add. That's very common. People will send me photos or they'll send me emails, and they have rolled out their crust and it's very dry and crumbly. It's usually because they didn't add enough liquid. So that's a very common problem. Sometimes the dough is too wet, it's just the opposite thing, and it sticks to whatever surface they're rolling it on. So those are two of the most common problems right there.
In order to get the buttery, golden crust that adequately holds the filling in place, stick to following the exact recipe and give yourself ample time in case you make a mistake. Remember that creating crust from scratch takes patience and practice, And if you're crunched for time during the holidays, pre-make the dough.
I do that all the time. I make the dough, I shape it into a disc, and I wrap that disc in plastic and slip it into a plastic bag, and I put that in the freezer. And that's a big help to have those pie doughs made ahead of time. You can even roll it out ahead of time and put it in your pan and get it all shaped and flute the edge and have that pie shell waiting for you in the freezer.
And if you're way over your head this December, Haedrich says you can make and bake a pecan pie in the days before and then stick it in the freezer. Just make sure you pull it out the night before so it has time to defrost. Whatever your pie looks like in the end, cut yourself some slack and give yourself a pat on the back.
Every year the magazines have these killer pies on the cover, but people don't realize that it's taken a team of food stylists and bakers a week to make that pie and make it look fabulous. So those are unrealistic expectations that we should just let go of when we're making a pie, and just know that ours is going to have some dings. It's going to bubble over the edge. It's going to be a lot of things, but it's probably not going to be perfect. And that's perfectly okay.
Whether you stick to the traditional classics or venture outside the box this holiday season, remember that all pie is good pie. To get recipes and find step-by-step instruction, check out Ken Haedrich's new book, Pie Academy, available in stores and online now. You can also view helpful videos and tips at pieacademybook.com. To find additional links and archives of past shows, log on to viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
As many as 89% of hospitalized COVID-19 patients are at risk of a complication called cytokine storm, a leading cause of COVID death. But there's good news. Hospitals across the U.S. are enrolling patients in a trial evaluating lenzilumab, an investigational treatment designed specifically to stop this storm, even with only 1 day of treatment. Dr. Cameron Durant, CEO of Humanigen, the company developing lenzilumab.
Having a therapeutic that can significantly reduce the time to recovery from COVID-19 and send patients home earlier could dramatically impact the arc of this pandemic.
Participating in the study means access to a potential treatment option in addition to standard of care therapies. Trial participant Mark Baranski shares his experience.
I don't know if I received lenzilumab or not, but I viewed the trial as doing everything I could for my recovery while contributing to the fight against COVID-19. I certainly encourage others to do the same.
To learn more and find this trial near you, visit StopStorm.com. That's StopStorm.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
He's often drawn as half genius, half jerk from birth. That's not accurate.
The lasting legacy of the late Steve Jobs. Then,
most of us revert to some sort of what we call an adapter. It's a little nervous gesture that we use, a self-soothing gesture like rubbing your fingertips together.
What signs do you show when you're feeling tense or telling a lie? I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.